All right. Thank you, everyone, for your interest today in our 7th leadership series featuring Dr. Bates. We will begin in just a moment. But first, I'm going to introduce Dr. Bates with a little basic outline of kind of, where he comes from, credentials, experience, all that good stuff, and then I'll let him add anything else. So Dr. Bates is president of Wilmington College and also a professor of sports sciences. Earned his BS in athletic training from Millikan, master's of kinesiology from University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, and then his DHSC, which I'm not 100% certain what the credential is for, so I'll let you explain that in a second, but with health sciences, AT Still University of Health Sciences. A licensed and certified athletic trainer, licensed in the state of Ohio. Current president of Wilmington College, professor of sports science, has been at Mercy College of Ohio, Heidelberg, Millikan, Decatur Memorial Hospital, and the University of Illinois. It volunteers with the board of directors for United Church Homes, and vice president of the Great Lakes Athletic Trainers Association. Is interested in pain perception in physically active populations, leadership development in healthcare and higher education, and emotional intelligence and hiring. And a little personal info is he's married to Cassandra with his 2 sons, Ethan and Liam, enjoys grilling and ironing, person of strong Christian faith from a big family, lives in a Midwestern town ranging from 1,500 to several millions of people, or has lived, apologies, and is a former high school student athlete in wrestling, cross country, and track and field. So without further ado, Dr. Bates, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Nicholas, and I appreciate the invitation. And just so from a clarity standpoint, the DHSC is a Doctorate of Health Sciences, and the focus there, I was really interested in learning more about hiring, assuming that I might continue down a leadership role and really be interested in learning more about what it takes to find the right people to help an organization be stronger is something that I continue to learn more about. And so the focus in that Doctorate of Health Sciences was on emotional intelligence in the hiring process, focused really on the health sciences and natural sciences faculty and staff. And so that was eye-opening, to say the least. And we might talk a little bit about that. So I want to get right into this. So what I want to talk about today is really a little bit about the employer's perspective. And before I share my screen, I want to give you a little bit of background. So I have served as an assistant athletic trainer, a head athletic trainer, working with football, men's and women's basketball, soccer, track and field, pretty much a wide range. I've worked in a clinical setting, outreach to a junior college, as well as in the doctor's office. And I've also gone down this rabbit hole of administration. So I served as an athletic training program director, clinical coordinator, dean, vice president, and now I serve as the president of a small college here in Ohio. And so that's just a little bit about where I'm coming from. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just walk through a few slides. So I have essentially 8 questions that I want to ask you all that I want to have some discussion on. So I'll invite you to make comments at any time, and certainly we have time at the end to do a little Q&A. So just to get started, I wanted to make sure that you gain some clarity. So from an employer's perspective, I want you to know here are 8 things that in our conversation, when you're interviewing, when you're sending a cover letter or resume, here are 8 things that I'm looking for, that my colleagues who are on search committees are looking for. And for folks who will be interviewing you when you're going around campus, here's some things that are on their mind. And I should really stop and say, these same things should also be on your mind. And so you should not leave an interview process without the answer to these questions yourself about the organization you're considering joining. Okay, so 8 questions. Question number 1, who are you? We call it the existential question. And how do you connect with who we are? So every institution that you join is going to have a mission. At Wilmington College, for example, our mission is to educate, inspire, and prepare each student for a life of service and success. And so what I want to know, if you're interviewing for an athletic training position at my institution or any other position, do you understand who we are and how do you connect with that? And do you know where we're going? So we have a vision. Our vision is to grow and to continue to be a leader in healthcare in the different areas that we do really, really well. So if I were to answer this question, If you would ask me, who am I and how am I connected to you? I would think, okay, what's the title of the position that I'm applying for? Let's say I'm an assistant athletic trainer, and that role plays a huge role in the health and safety of a campus community. And so if your vision is to educate, inspire, and prepare students, then I want to make sure that they're healthy when that's happening, making sure that all of their needs from an athletic training standpoint are taken care of. And our vision together would be to make sure that we only get better and stronger. And I'm happy to do anything I can to make sure that that happens. And so this is me talking, but my question, and you don't have to answer it now, is how would you answer that question? Who are you? And how do you connect with who we are and where we're headed? You notice I put the mission and vision in parentheses because they're not going to say those words, but those are the things that they're actually looking to hear. And so look at a website, look at the institution's mission, vision, look at their strategic plan and say, okay, I understand where you're headed. And that little bit of extra work will go a long way. So that's question number one, the existential question. Who are you? Question number two, how do we know we can trust you to do what you say you can do and will do? Because you say a lot of things, right? People in interviews, they say all the right things. Any smart person will say, yeah, of course I'm going to be here early and I'll stay late. Absolutely. And of course, I'll do anything that you ask me to do. And yes, of course, I deal well with challenges and frustration. Nobody ever tells you, yeah, I'm not really good at teamwork during an interview. And so when we ask this sort of question, it goes both ways. You want to know from the employer, how can I trust that you say that you're a great place to work and that people get along well and you give great feedback? So you want to make sure that you get a good understanding of whenever I'm evaluated or assessed, what does that look like? And how do I know that it's going to go the way that they say it is? And this is where you talk to a colleague who's also new at the institution and say, tell me about the evaluation process. Tell me about the review process. How does that go on? And make sure that it matches up with what you've been told. This comes down to evidence. So if I ask you, how do I know I can trust that you will do what you say you can do? This is a key opportunity for you to give me an example. So you can say, not only do I get to work first and leave last, many of my colleagues often, will compliment me on my punctuality and my preparedness. And one of my references, for example, Dr. Bates, can tell you a little bit more about that. And so if you answer the question and tie it with evidence, it's even stronger. Okay, so question number two. Question number three is the pressure question. As an athletic trainer, you have to be able to keep your cool under pressure. Anything can happen. Today is one of the biggest days of college football that you'll ever see. It's rivalry week. Always hard to say those two words. And all sort of things can happen. People get pretty amped and excited, high level collisions, multiple injuries. And when that happens, if you're a new grad especially, how do we know you can keep your cool? And so how do you answer that? You give an example. And you talk about the 3 or 4 different times where you saw catastrophic injuries and how your supervising AT really demonstrated to you the best way to handle those things and how you deal with the energy in an environment. Sometimes something happens and you're in the middle of a soccer practice on a distant field. Nobody's around to watch. But sometimes that injury happens on Sunday and it's being televised by millions of people. So how do you keep cool? A lot of times they may not ask you this question, but they certainly are thinking about it, particularly if you're talking about working with high level and highly visible athletics. Okay, so keep your cool. The weakness question, everybody asks this question, right? They usually will say, what's your greatest weakness? And I think that's kind of boring. What I want you to hear when someone asks you, what's your weakness? I want you to hear this question. What are you lacking and or do you need from us to be successful? Because if you're new to an organization, new to the profession, everybody knows there are a lot of things that you don't know. That's obvious. The question is, do you know? And can you say, well, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to when joining your organization is I saw that your team does a lot of manual therapy, joint molds, and a lot of things with different tools. And I'm really excited about learning more about those things because they weren't a huge part of my undergraduate training or my graduate training, but I'm really excited to learn more. So you just answered the weakness question with saying, here's something you can do for me, without ever saying, I can't do it. So when you hear that question, and you're going to hear it, so it may be the first question sometimes they ask you, what is your weakness? Think about it as, what do you need from them in order to be stronger? So then there's the opposite question, the strength question. And if you're looking at some of these images, know that I'm a big fan of athletics. I wouldn't have become an athletic trainer if I wasn't. But the intensity, what's the immediate impact that your addition will make to our team? So we have a team here that is really cohesive. They work well together. When you come in, what do you bring? One of the things as a new graduate that I would suggest that you mention is, of anyone on the team that you're joining, you have the freshest, newest knowledge in athletic training of anybody on their team, guaranteed, because you just graduated from a curriculum that has more information in it than probably most of those folks who already work there had. So you can bring new information, new techniques, new skill sets potentially as a new graduate that often are not things that folks who've been around for a long time have seen because they've been out of school for a while. So you can bring a fresh perspective, new eyes. So your strength is that you haven't been around for a long time, as opposed to that being potentially a weakness. So the immediate impact is you're looking forward to really seeing how they do things and sharing a different perspective. Not that you're going to change things necessarily, but certainly you can give some different ideas that might enhance things and make them better. And then there's the dreamer question. Why are you worth the investment? Why should we invest in your dream? Someday you want to be a head athletic trainer, or you want to work with Olympic sports, or you want to do something really, really exciting. And we know that this is a step on your journey. Why should we do that for you? And this is something I really want you to think about, because oftentimes, we go into these sort of positions and the employer is thinking, I'm thinking as the president of a college, I have 3 or 4 different choices. Why you? What's the investment in you worth? And it's something that every individual has to ask themselves to be prepared to really talk about it. When I think about this question, what I'm really looking for is for someone to tell me that, really I'm at the beginning of my career. I'm excited to make a huge impact. And I know that that takes time, which means I'm here to learn. I'm here to really absorb as much as I can. And the investment you're making in me will give back, because I'm not just getting into this for myself. I'm getting into this to make the whole organization stronger and better in any way that I can. So I know now as the employer, it's not just about you, it's about us. And that's a really important point to make. So then there's the collaboration question. I'm going to tell you a quick story here. So when I worked at the University of Illinois, I had an opportunity to work with adapted athletics, wheelchair sports. And so that team that you see there, at one point, years ago, I was the athletic trainer for that team. And actually the person in the polo was one of my athletes. She's now the head coach there. Her name's Stephanie Wheeler. And what I really learned there was collaboration. As a part of that team, there was an athletic trainer, actually several athletic trainers, physical therapists, a strength and conditioning coach, and a variety of other professionals working together in a way that when I was an undergrad, I didn't work in a team that connected. There were sports professionals, but we didn't all sit in the same office and work together for a team. And so the question here is, who have you been and who are your potential partners? Meaning, do you see the clear opportunities for connections between yourself, your role, and other roles within the organization? So one thing that I really didn't see when I first started working was some of my partners might be the registered dietitian or the nurse over in the health center, or it could even be the equipment manager, and really finding ways to make the student athlete experience way more connected, way more exciting, because we found hurdles that might be in their way to really inhibit their success, and we move them. And when you're working with people who have a common goal and you're seeing each other as partners, not competitors, That I can't stress how important really seeing collaboration and not competition is important. Because sometimes it comes down to a team not being successful because maybe an individual is looking for the glory or looking for the credit. I believe it was Abraham Lincoln who said, "It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit." And so I want you to think about that. When you get into different situations, the goal is for everyone to be successful. The goal is not for you necessarily to walk away with an individual accolade. Okay. So now I'm going to spend the most time on this one. Question number 8, the bonus question. Now, if any of you are basketball fans, you might recognize that face. That's the Michael Jordan. And we can have an argument if we would like about who the greatest basketball players of all time. And I'm looking forward to certainly engaging in that. But this is really not necessarily about him. It's about the person he's leaning on. If you can see the number, it's 33, which is Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen was the number 2 on that team. And what he did that he didn't have to do was he took a backseat role. He was a great player who recognized that being number 2 was better for the team than him trying to be number 1. And so the question that I always want to know, especially from a new grad, especially from someone who doesn't have a lot of different experiences, what have you done that you didn't have to do? And that's usually one where I'll sit and just wait. And I want to just hear what comes out of your mouth. And if you struggle, think about this right now. If you're struggling to say, what did I do as a graduate student or undergraduate student that wasn't required of me? And if that takes a long time, what do you think that suggests to me as the employer? It suggests that maybe, and maybe I'm wrong, but it suggests that you're going to do the minimum, that you're not going to go out of your way. You're not going to be looking for ways to contribute that go beyond specifically what we hired you to do. And that to me goes back to that investment question earlier. If you're worth the investment, then I know that I'm going to get more than I expect. And you also should expect the same thing. And so this year has been a tough year with COVID. It's been a tough year with so many different challenges that folks have had. And so this year, what have you done that you didn't have to do? What excuses have you gotten rid of to say, you know what, it's not an excuse? COVID is a challenge, but we want to make sure that our student athletes are as healthy and as safe as possible. Yeah, there are all these things that are going on. I had to do this virtual and I had to, do things a little bit different, a non-traditional way. But in the midst of that, what extra did you do? What little, not, and I'm just talking about something significant. What little extra things did you do to give yourself the experience and the confidence to be successful? That's a huge question for me. And it's a huge question for the people who are looking at you as a potential colleague because times are going to get tough. They're going to get exhausting and frustrating. This is a time of year where overlap is happening and we have fall sports, we have winter sports, and spring sports have no idea that it's nowhere near spring. They don't care. They're still out there. And so knowing that all of that's happening and you have a day off, what do you do at that time? How do you really assess, maybe I could help my colleagues out by going in for a half an hour and helping out with pre-practice treatments. Maybe I can go in and do a little documentation or do a little follow-up. Those tiny little extra things that you do, they go a long way and people notice them. And so these are the really intensive 8 questions that I want you to be thinking about. And I also have a few more questions that as we go into a piece of dialogue, I'm going to challenge you to ask me some questions and I'm going to challenge you to answer a couple of additional questions. Okay. So I'm going to take just a break here, just a second here. I want you to think, and I'm going to slide back. Okay. So question 8, the bonus question. Question 7, the collaboration question. Question 6, the dreamer question. Question 5, the strength question. Question 4, the weakness question. Question 3, it's all about pressure, the pressure question. Question 2, how do we know? The epistemological question. It's another fancy word. And then question number 1, it always comes back to the top. Who are you? You've heard these 8 questions. And I want you to think, if I were sitting down with Dr. Bates today and I was interviewing for a position at Wilmington College, or if I was joining an organization that's one that he's been a part of, or someone were to call him and say, what can you tell me about who this young person is, who this professional is? Do I know enough? Who are you? So you have 8 questions. And I'm going to go down to my very last slide now, okay? And I'm trying to be intentional here by letting you see these questions again, okay? And I think, by the way, if you were wondering who I think the greatest of all time is, I'm not going to say words. I'll just show you pictures. Okay, and now we're back to the bonus question. What have you done that you didn't have to do? Today, if you're sitting here in this space, or if you're viewing this after it happened, you're doing something that you didn't have to do. You're taking an extra step. If you're a part of a committee, if you joined an organization at your college, if you're active in your AT organization, if you are doing these tiny little things to help your organization and to help yourself, think about them as opportunities for you to discuss with a future employer. And now to my last slide. So when you're looking for that next step, and I can tell you in my career, this year I started here at Wilmington College, and it's an honor and a blessing to be one of about a handful of athletic trainers who serve as a college president. It is an exciting time to be in higher education. It's crazy, no doubt. And I can tell you that I'm excited about you. At one point, I had the honor of serving in a similar role as Jenna, advising what was then this group under a different name. And what I saw was potential. And that's what I'm excited about today. That's why when Nicholas reached out to me, I was super excited to say, yes, if I can do anything to contribute to the future, because someday I'm not going to sit in this chair, somebody else will. And hopefully one of you will. So I want to learn, what are you excited about? And then also, whenever you try something new, whenever you go into a new role, you have some concerns because no one's ever going to tell you everything. They're trying to recruit you, so they're not going to scare you away. They certainly want to paint a good picture and give you the rosy kind of perspective and tell you all the great things that can happen. Can you imagine if you went into a job interview and they said, listen, this is a terrible job and we hope you take it? Could you imagine that? I hope you wouldn't take it if they were that honest with you. But there are some things that during that vetting process, that interview process, you should express, well, here's some things that are unclear to me, that I have some concerns about, that I'd love to learn a little bit more about. And so framing it up that way, some of you right now are on the job market. Some of you are looking for opportunities and you're excited about the potential. You're concerned about the uncertainty and the newness of being in a new space. And you want to learn more about, is this the right move for me? And so what I would challenge you to do is don't leave that space without making sure the answer to those 8 questions, you leave them with a good answer and you walk away with what you need to make sure you can make a good decision. Because you may not think about it this way, but I want to tell you that when you're going through any sort of a process, it's not just about the employer's perspective. Yes, that's the title of this leadership series, but it's also about your perspective. Because you have to remember, you have the opportunity to say, no thanks. Appreciate the opportunity, but based on what I've learned, this might not be the best move for me. That is tough because When you don't have a job, for example, that's the toughest time to say, you know what, this new opportunity may not be for me. But when you do have a role and a responsibility and you're looking at something new, you should have a little bit more confidence because you already have a good space and you're only looking for a better one. So that's the presentation part that I wanted to give. I believe that the better we go 50-50 in this conversation, the more you can get out of it. So I've taken about half of this time, which was my goal and intention. And now what I want to do is maybe to hear a little bit of your thoughts about some of these questions or some of the things that you might say, well, Dr. Bates, what if I got into this situation? Or what do you think about fill in the blank? I'm here for you. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can see each other a bit and we'll talk a little bit.
I have a question. My name is Brianna Metcalf, and I'm a second year graduate student in the Master's in Athletic Training program at North Central College. One of the things that doesn't really get talked about enough, in my opinion, or I haven't really heard much on, is in the interview process and after they've offered you the job, what does negotiation look like, and like what things should you negotiate, or maybe what things are should you not negotiate, or add-ons, I guess, if you will. I'm not sure what the correct verbiage for that is, but I just had a question about that.
Absolutely, Brianna, and thank you for joining. North Park is actually where I took my certification exam. And so on that campus, when I was a young punk, I was up there and scared and nervous. And I remember sitting in an auditorium and it all turned out well, but very special place. So let me tell you this. Even if someone tells you something is not negotiable, it is negotiable. Okay. If you're someone who I'm interested in joining our team, then you need to be very clear about um, two things. One is I'm never going to give you the best offer I can on the first try. It's just not going to happen because my job as an employer is to get the best person at the best price. That's my job. Best person, best price. And so if I can recruit you at a reasonable rate that maybe saves the college a few bucks, but also makes you happy, that's the goal. In my first job, Brianna, I worked at a little place in Illinois called Lincoln College. And they were connected to Decatur Memorial Hospital as an outreach. And one of the things that I was interested in was eating. You know, I worked long hours as an athletic trainer. I was the primary athletic trainer for Lincoln College. And I also helped out at Lincoln Christian College and Lincoln High School, who were also in that town. So it was probably about 35 minutes away. And I said, is the salary negotiable? And they said, no, salary is set. You know, that's the highest we can go. And I said, well, you're about 3,000 less than where I'd like to be. And is it reasonable for me to assume that I'm your top candidate? Which was an awkward question for them. And they said, yes. And I said, so what's the value of a meal plan? Then they said, well, we're not sure. And I said, well, I looked it up and it's about $2,500 is a meal plan that gives 3 meals a day, not the unlimited. And is there extra food in the cafeteria at the end of the day? And then they started smiling because they said, yes. I said, I'd like a meal plan. I understand the salary is not negotiable, but that additional $2,500 would give me the flexibility to do more for you because I wouldn't have to travel or take food with me. I could eat and knowing that I may be there some days at 7 a.m. and some days well beyond 7 p.m., that would be something that would be helpful for me. What do you say? And they said, well, we've never done that before. And I said, was that your answer or was that a question? I'm not exactly sure. And I was a cocky little monster, as you can imagine, at that time. And they said, you know, we'll take it back and we'll take a look. And I ended up getting a meal plan, which to me, financially, if you understand shopping and food and time, it was huge for me because I never had to pack lunch. You know, I often just ate dinner, had a snack with me every now and then, but all of my major meals, I was able to eat there and unlimited. So didn't cost them anything, but it's a great benefit to me. So everything's negotiable. The key is when you get a good offer, don't be so excited that it's a good offer. What else is on your minds?
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I have a question as well, Dr. Bates. I'm a first-year graduate student at UW Milwaukee right now. And you talked a lot about questions that they're going to ask us, but what do you think are important questions that we should be asking? Or if you were an interviewer, what questions would you like to be asked that would kind of spark you or maybe catch you off guard, but in a good way?
So I will tell you this, Brooke, the most important question you could ask them is, what's your greatest concern about my candidacy for this position? Because they're not going to tell you that. What they're going to do is ask you questions that are going to be aimed at trying to get an answer to that question. But what they're not going to say is, Brooke, we're really concerned that you don't have experience doing this. So we're really concerned about that. And so a good question, self-awareness wise, if you came to me and said, you know, Dr. Bates, this has been a great interview and I've had a great opportunity to learn a lot of things. What's your biggest concern about me if I were to be hired? Because that puts me in a very interesting position. I have an answer to that question. There's no way I don't have an answer. And I would be impressed that you would be daring enough to get an answer to that question, because oftentimes after the interview, you think, what did I do wrong? What were their concerns? What didn't I have that they were looking for? Why did they hire the other person? When you ask that question, it helps give you clarity on maybe why things might go one way or the other. And then you can address that concern and make sure it doesn't live beyond that interview.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, when someone invites you to campus, the odds of them wanting to offer you a job are very, very high. Usually we invite 3 people. 2 of them are our favorites, and sometimes the third person, which you never know if you're the first, second, or third, the third person is pretty close, but the other 2 may have an advantage over that person in some way. But that third one could close the gap based on how they perform in the interview. And so if you walk into that interview thinking, they invited me to their home for dinner, then you should eat by asking questions. Nicholas, you were close to jumping in there earlier. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I was gonna say that if anyone had any questions, they can feel free to just unmute themselves, and if they want to turn their camera on, they can. But
Let me add a little bit more that may spark some additional questions. So this is a hard job. There are unique aspects of being an athletic trainer. And one of the things that someone might ask you is, why do you want to be an athletic trainer? Why did you choose to be an athletic trainer? And for me, I'll be honest with you, initially, I wasn't even all that familiar with athletic training. I was familiar with nursing, and I was a high school wrestler, and I spent my first year with the wrestling program when I was in college. And a person who turned out to be one of my best friends was an athletic training student. And I went into the athletic training room to turn in some paperwork, and I said, his name's Blaine. I said, Blaine, what are you doing in here? He's like, this is my major. This is what I do. And I'm like, explain it to me. What do you mean? And so he explained to me this collision between these 2 things that I loved, which were helping people and being in an athletic environment. And at that moment, I thought, so you're telling me I could spend every day, if I so choose to, around competitive people, trying to do their best to succeed, working hard, and I could play a role in helping them to be healthy and successful. I was done at that moment. I said, yes. And so some people will say, if you find the right thing to do, you'll never work another day. That's not exactly true. It is work. I mean, that's not exactly true. But the point is, you get to choose that work, and you get to be excited about the environment. The environment is the key. For me, if I would have been an accountant, I would probably have been an accountant in a collegiate setting or in an athletic setting. Because for me, the setting was the great attraction. The people who I was around every day and what they were doing was where I would be if I wasn't getting paid to be there. So I'm curious from some of you, why did you choose this route?
I can answer that question. So I got introduced into athletic training in high school. I was a track athlete, and I really was never injured or anything like that. But I had friends who would hang around the athletic training room, and kind of got acquainted with who the athletic trainer was. Started to like what she was doing, and she created the opportunity for me to be a student aide. And so being with her in my off season is what kind of got me into it, and I started to really like it. And then from there, I kind of just took off with it and knew that this is what I wanted to get into, and did some more observation hours. And then that's I guess the rest is history after that.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
I have kind of the opposite experience from Brianna, if I'm pronouncing your name right. In high school, I had an athletic trainer that I had to go to after I had my first concussion, and the experience wasn't amazing. She was kind of like cold and a little bit different than what I thought she was going to be. She was a little bit of an older lady, and I love the idea of being an athletic trainer. I love sports. I just like you, Dr. Bates, like the competitive nature and everything has really sparked my interest. But I wanted to be that person that you can go to talk to be warm and comforting and understanding about your injury, because soccer was something I was super passionate about, but I didn't like going to the athletic trainer because of how I was kind of treated and a little bit cold to me. So I wanted to be that person that you can create rapport with, to be a comforting person. And I'm kind of a science nerd too, so that kind of added to my interest as well. So just kind of inspired me to be different, to treat others differently.
The profession will be better for it. Thank you. What about you, Nicholas? Why did you get into this thing? And Sarah too.
I'll share mine. I'm Sarah. I'm in my first year master's at North Park. I'm actually Canadian, so I'm an international student. So back in Canada, we don't actually have like a lot of ATs or like athletic training. So how I kind of like got into it when I was in my undergrad for kinesiology, my friend was like, "Oh, I work at the other university as like one of the student ATs there." She's like, "You should apply and like try and get in." And my dad works there too, so I applied. I ended up working with the football team there for 2 years, and like our observational hours I find are more like our practicums here. So I actually did like a lot of like hands-on experience during my undergrad. And like I remember the quarterback broke his arm during one game and I got to hold it, and I knew like ever since that moment and like being there and like attending to injuries, I just knew that's what I wanted to do, and ended up coming here for school and fell in love with the whole athletic training aspect of things.
You know, Sarah, that's the crazy thing about an athletic trainer is when things get crazy and they get, arms get broken and stuff like that, like we lean in. And that's when I know I'm among friends. It's like the football game is on, something nasty happens and people are looking away. And I'm like, show the replay. So I'm with you. And Sarah, also, I spent about, I would say 9 or 10 years in, I know that Jenna continues to volunteer at the Chicago Marathon, and your athletic training program plays a pretty big role in that. So please say hello to the faculty over there for me.
I will. I'll tell Andrew you say hi.
Appreciate it.
Andrew and Alyssa. Alyssa's the one who sent us the link to sign up for this to do everything today.
Yeah, Alyssa and I go way back, and Andrew as well. They are great people.
Yeah.
So I had a similar experience to Brooke. I had a concussion in, I think it was my sophomore year of high school. And I was playing for a club team at the time, so I didn't have an athletic trainer, and I don't think my school had one, or if we did, it was just PRN for football coverage. So I never had an athletic trainer, and I just went to my like primary care physician, and I just sat out for a month, and then one day went back, and they were like, "Oh, do you have any symptoms?" And I said no, and they were like, "You're cleared." So I I didn't have an athletic training experience, and I just sat out for a month. Um, when I feel like there could have been more done. So I kind of wanted to get into the field to prevent that from happening to other people, regardless of the injury.
Yeah, it is. It's amazing how much more we know in healthcare than we knew, even 10 years ago. And I think about um, technology and information from a perspective of there's some stuff, and this is maybe a crazy thing I'm going to say to you. There's some stuff that you're learning right now that 20 years from now we won't be doing. And that seems a little bit strange, right? At one point in healthcare, and this was a long time ago, way longer than any of us have been alive. But if you got sick, they'd put leeches all over your body, and they'd suck out. The theory was those leeches sucked out the bad blood, and your body would create new, better blood, and you'd be healthy. That's what we knew at the time. That's what people practiced, but we know better now. And so it's not that what we're doing is stagnant in any way, because there are some things now, for example, in the state of Ohio, where I work, new laws have been passed and our practice has been expanded because of a lot of the educational changes that are being made by the CAT and across the country in all the athletic training programs. And so athletic training students today are learning things as entry level coming into the profession that some folks have never learned, may never learn, or maybe took 20 years to learn. And so this is where I said earlier about the strength that you have is you are being taught, each one of you is being taught information, skills. You'll have knowledge and abilities that many of the people who you go and work with, they won't have them. And so you have to be very cautious and careful about being helpful and inquisitive, because you'll still be new and you might know a little bit more about certain things, but you certainly want to be careful about that, because there's this thing called ego and it is real. But thank you all for sharing that. I do have one other question for you all. So what's the question that you are most afraid of being asked? So if you go on an interview, what's the question that you think, I just hope they don't ask me this. I just really hope. What comes to mind?
I sometimes have trouble answering the weakness question. It's just I don't always focus on. I wouldn't say that weaknesses are necessarily always negative, but to me, I get focused and put those things into a negative box, and then it's like, okay, I'm speaking negatively about myself. But I liked how you kind of turned that around. So I think I have a little bit better way of answering that question, but definitely the weakness question.
Yeah, you can think about that question as what are you working on? So what your weakness could also be, what are you working on? And so you can say, this last season I worked with outdoor track and field, and I didn't get as much time, hands-on taping ankles, and that's something that, I've been working on as some of my skills that I haven't used. Certainly very comfortable and confident with them, but I wouldn't necessarily call them weaknesses, but I would say there's some things that I'm working on.
I agree with the same question about weakness, but also I think strengths can be hard to answer as well, because you don't want to come off cocky. You don't want to say, oh, I'm good at this, 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 this. You want to keep it professional, which I think is hard. Maybe you could go back to that question and maybe rephrase some things that you could say, or maybe some experiences that would help. And also, side note, Michigan did beat Ohio State, so take that however you want to.
That's why you play the game. You got to play the game. Nobody gets any credit. You got to get in there, and that's why I love athletics, because you just never know how the ball's going to bounce. So, but to the point of the strength question. So, if you think, Brooke, about your experiences, there are certain maybe settings you've had a chance to work in, And because of the opportunity to work in those settings, or because of you've had the opportunity to work with a difficult coach, or have a season where you've had a star player have a catastrophic injury, or maybe you've endured a losing season. Those are things that you can say, you know, one of the things that I think is a strength of mine is I've been on a team where they haven't been successful, and injuries tend to pile up, you know, sometimes when the wins don't. And so I understand the mental aspect of athletics and sport, and working collaboratively, potentially with sports psychologists or other sorts of motivators to help student athletes, you know, really understand that they're still learning, they're still growing, and mental health is a big part of what they're doing, not just the physical health. And so being exposed to that early on, any of the challenges, think of anything that's given you a headache or any bad day that you've had, that is now a strength, because someone else has not dealt with that yet. So what other questions would you be a little maybe hesitant, or maybe want to talk a little bit more about? If I get asked this question, how do I tackle it?
Dr. Bates, we've had a couple conversations about this back in the day, but what are some things that women tend to not do so well when they interview compared to some of their male counterparts?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a whole nother presentation, but I've given a couple of presentations to groups of female athletic training students and nurses, because what I've noticed in my career is that women are a lot more humble and kind, and they tend not to negotiate. To Brianna's question earlier, they tend not to ask for anything more if they think they're given a good deal. And men who are less qualified but more confident for one reason or another tend to be more aggressive. And like I said earlier, it is very unlikely that you're going to apply for a job and I'm going to say, okay, our starting salary is $47,500 with benefits. And if you came to me and said, that sounds great, I really appreciate it, I was looking more toward 50, can we meet somewhere in the middle? The question is, am I willing to lose my top pick for $1,500? The answer is probably not. And so what I want all of you to think about is, if I don't ask, the answer is no every time. But if I do ask in a respectful way and they say no, and I'm willing to still move forward, it's not gonna happen where you're gonna ask or negotiate with me and I'm gonna say, well, since you asked me for more, then I'm gonna take my offer back. This is not Shark Tank, okay? This is your profession and your career, and everyone's goal is the same, to have the best person join the team. And if it costs a little bit more to do that and it's within reason, I'm likely going to consider that. It's my favorite part of it, actually, that conversation, that piece of negotiating benefits and salary and other things, because it's important that you have what you need. No one anywhere is required to take a job, is required to sit in a particular position. But if you accept a position and a role, then know that you're comfortable with it. What I'd hate for you to do is to accept a job at a salary with certain benefits, and then a year later or 5 years later say, yeah, this isn't enough for me. Up front, try to get what you can, and understand that no one's going to promise you a 20% raise in 5 years. That's not going to happen. So what you ask for up front is extremely important. This has been great. I appreciate the questions.
I have
Anything
another question, and I'm
Sure.
not sure if like it just depends person to person, but I found like during my grad school interviews, applying to grad school, some of the questions, were traditional questions, strengths, weaknesses, etc. But actually answering the questions in a way that seems natural and not so robotic. Like, do you have any or program? Do you have any advice on answering questions that way? or not trying to answer questions that way, and just a little bit more natural. Because I find that if I know the person I'm interviewing with ahead of time, I'm a little more relaxed.
Yes, so I think that for me, stories make things more personal. So it connects me to you because I remember stories. And so I told you a story a little bit ago about a time when I negotiated a benefit. And that story might stick with you as opposed to if I just told you a bunch of facts and figures. And so if someone asks you a question about your strength and you tie that to a specific experience you had with women's soccer, or if they ask you about a weakness and you tie that to a really tough day you had at football practice where you didn't feel as confident, but since then, you've gone back to the drawing board. When you connect, it's one of my mentors, she uses the acronym SAR, situation, action, result. And so if you ask me a question, then I'm going to tell you a situation where, maybe I felt like I had a weakness. I'm going to tell you what I've been doing or what I've done, what action I've taken to address that. And then I'm going to tell you the result, meaning I'm going to tell you where I'm at today. And so if you think about, I want to talk about a situation or share a story, give a specific action about something I've done, and then talk about the result, that tells me that you are being more authentic and I'm learning more about you, not just, well, I think my weakness is that I don't have enough experience, or I think my weakness is fill in the blank. It's bland, it's not conversational. But if you tell me a little bit of a story, or that you're talking to a bunch of athletic trainers. So when Brooke was talking about the injury and when things get all strange, and I think someone else mentioned it, and you love that, know that everybody else in that room feels the same way. Like they like the same things you do. And so you're among friends. You're amongst people who want to be there and they want to work and they love the environment. And so if you can connect your experiences, I guarantee you they'll be nodding their heads thinking, yeah, when I was an undergrad student, yeah, I remember a time like that. So I would connect it: situation, action, result.
Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
I'm just interested in knowing which question you think is the hardest and why.
Well, it's tough because it depends on the position. I would say the toughest question is, who are you? Because what they typically are going to ask you is, tell me a little bit about yourself. That is a trap question. Let me tell you that right now. Okay. If I ever ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself, I'm not asking you to tell me how many sisters and brothers you have. I'm not asking you to tell me like that you drive a tractor or that you own a race car. Like, what I'm asking is, who are you in relationship to this job, to this organization? And so if you say, I'm a person who likes to help people. I'm a person that when there's a fire or an injury or something's going on, I tend to run toward it. And so I like to be involved. I like to be engaged in a fast-paced environment. And that's why I'm an athletic trainer. And I'm a person who really loves and cares about my family. And so time with family is limited as an athletic trainer, but I want you to know that family is really important to me. And having the opportunity to have some balance in the work that I do with the other things that I value and that are important to me, those things are things that I want you to know about me. And what I just did was I connected values that I have to values you have. Right. So if you know that Wilmington College has a value of community, a value of respect for all persons, if you knew that and you somehow connected that who you are with who we are, then I'm sold, because I believe that we believe the same thing. I believe that we want the same thing. And I know that when I ask you who you are, you connect with us, not just you. That's a hard question because it seems like it seems like an easy intro. Tell us a little bit about yourself. It's never that simple. These are great questions. who knows, maybe someday we'll run into each other at GLADA and we can talk a little bit more about it. I'm looking forward to being there this year. Hopefully we can, I know that currently it's scheduled to be in person, so looking forward to being there. And just a shameless plug, a few colleagues of mine who work at both Ohio State and Michigan will be presenting together. So we'd love to meet you all in person if you're there.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Bates. I'll have one last couple questions. So if anyone has any more questions that they would like to ask, feel free. Otherwise, I believe that will conclude the leadership series for today. Last call. All right. Perfect. Well,
Thanks,
thank
Dr.
you.
Bates, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining. And yes, thank you, Dr. Bates.
Have a great night. I appreciate everyone. Good luck to you.